Good morning. Come on. Folks, I got to hear tornado sirens last night. We don't have severe weather in Oregon, so this week has been really exciting for me. So, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you so much for having me this morning. It is truly a great pleasure to be home once again. I don't think I've spoken here since, I think, the second one of these I ever did. I've done a few of them since then, having been in the rotation of our small congregation in Portland. And while you might hear similar references, I believe one of the ones I did here involves some Star Wars sound effects. We'll see if other things have improved since I was 22. We'll see. It's very nice to be back and be part of the singing. Another side note, sometimes when I'm in charge, I make my congregation, who is, entirely hymn-based, do some of that, just to feel the feels again of what it's like to sing praises like that. They go along with it, more or less. I'm having fun, and I think that's all that counts for the most part. But again, they say thank you when it's done. But it's nice to be back. And it's also quite appropriate that I speak here at home at the end of this particular summer. For the last 4 years, I've led a youth program out in the Pacific Northwest. And this summer, we took a trip to Denver, Colorado. And the theme for our trip was home. So a little backstory of what I've been involved in over the last 5 years, and I've been in charge for 4. So it's a program out there called Youth Venture for Christ Caravan. Some of you might actually be familiar with the concept of a caravan as a youth program. There we go. Dave's got it there. They used to be quite common in our church, and they were bigger, and I was in charge of the only one left. And what happens at a caravan, for those of you that don't know, is that we gather in the spring and practice a worship program for we being me, the staff, and the campers. Okay, thank you, Peanut Gallery. And then we take the show on the road for a week in June. So we've practiced it for 4 months, we've gotten together, we've talked about our theme, and then we take it on the road. And we not only do the worship program for the congregations that we visit, but we do community service in the area that we are, trying to take the mission of Jesus outside of the walls of the church. Like I said, you might remember being part of these. I'm part of the only one that's left in our church that I know of. And last summer, our kids and the staff and the congregations that we visited spoke and talked about the idea that God is everywhere, right? We can experience God no matter where we are. Sacred space is anywhere, no matter where. If we're at home, we're at school, we're at work, we're in the forest, we're on the beach, we're enjoying time with our family or friends. God is with us, and that Spirit is with us. And so we don't need these walls to experience God. But, there we go. Even though sacred space can be everywhere, we know that being here together this morning is a special blessing, right? Faith communities like ours, like this one, they serve as a special place to call home, to be with each other each week, to be part of a community. And so on this trip, I got to share in our sharing times about the many spiritual homes that I've gotten to call home over the years now. This was the first that I got to call home, first place that I got to belong. And here it was, in this building, in this room, I got to experience many of the things that we talked about, that we told the kids are part of being part of a faith community, part of having a spiritual home like a church, right? 2 things in particular we talked about. The fact that this is a community, right? We talk about, is it one of these? It's not one of these. It's the other set of lists that I can't remember. The blessings of community, right? It's a place to belong, a place that is outside your family where you get to experience connection and love, right? We come here every day, or every Sunday, we say hi, we give hugs, right? That is community. And I look back on it, long time now, and that's what I had here. So many of you in this room were part of what made that possible. And the ones that are no longer here, whether they're not here this Sunday or no longer here, made that happen, right? Now, these communities, these faith communities, don't only exist when you are present in the building, right? But they continue to exist, even for you, even for all of us, when we are gone. And they are places that you can return to whenever you want. That's the great thing about being in Community of Christ. That was one of the things I've shared as I've seen a lot of different congregations now, is how it is everywhere, right? Like I said, in this role, I've now gotten to go to probably 30 different congregations and been part of their services. And they were all places where we got to be welcomed, to have a familiar sense of being somewhere, being home. Right? We know that experience, maybe from our travels, right? We heard this countless times from people this summer of the story of being somewhere unfamiliar, needing help, car breakdown, right? Need a place to stay, and the local pastor was there to help. Right? Or you move to a new place, one that you haven't lived in before, and you find out that so-and-so called so-and-so who went to Graceland with them, and they told you they were coming. Right? And I have no idea who it was in this room, if they're even here, who called Gail Self in Orlando when Kristen and I left all those years ago. But when we walked in that community that first Sunday in Orlando, she was there, and she knew who we were, and she knew our story, because someone had said, they're coming, please welcome them home. And that's a home, and I'm glad to be at this home today. The other thing that we talked about that these faith communities give us as a home is life guidance, is a place to learn and grow in a safe space. I don't really remember much of the specific guidance that I got from the congregation, and maybe it never really was anything that specific, but probably what it was, and what it is for many people, is existing in a world, existing in a community where the behavior that we are expected to be and to follow as followers of Christ is exhibited, is lived, and when they are served as an example every week. And you just absorb that as a young person, right? It got absorbed by a kid like me, right? And when someone leaves that home that they have, and they move away from that environment, especially if they don't seek one out, right? That one where there's not only the examples of people living Christ-like lives that you can emulate and be like, but the community as a whole gently, sometimes not always so gently, but they hold us accountable for our actions. They make us live in that framework of Christ-like by gently reminding us this is the way we are to be every single week, right? But moving away gives people not only a chance to spread their wings, they try new things, right, away from those influences, but they get to make mistakes. They get to learn to be a person. But regardless of how far they've flung, no matter how far they stray, the great things like homes like this, you're always welcome back, no matter what, like I am today, right? And hopefully, there's forgiveness on the potluck table. But forgiveness is not just for those who are coming back to a home like this, the ones that I've just described, right? Forgiveness is a way home in our everyday lives as well. So like Amy talked about so eloquently in her open, our story and scripture for today is a man who just wanted to go home, right? Which is why, at the end of the story, he forgave so easily. And we're going to talk about the way that we can take this as a quality example for ourselves. Now, I haven't looked at this scripture in quite a while, and I don't think, as I often is the case when I do these, haven't ever read the entire story, right, front to back. I've just gotten the snippets and know the gist of it. And I haven't really been following the scripture series over the past couple weeks either, right? It's been a busy summer. We haven't actually been to church that often this summer. But we have the story of Joseph on tap. The story of Joseph in the Old Testament, not the New Testament. I would get those two confused, right? Because they're just Joseph. Like, are they the same Joseph? I don't know. They could be. People are old in the Bible. But we know this one, as she said. We know this one, right? Joseph, the favorite child, right, gets kidnapped by his brothers, sold into slavery. He ends up in Egypt, and he gets thrown into prison after a false accusation, right? He eventually finds favor with the Pharaoh after a particularly good run on prediction markets, right? I think he really nailed the "there will be a famine in 7 years" bet. He must have had a dream about it or something. But even with his eventual success, Joseph in this part of time of his life really probably surely had a lot of people he could have been angry with. And we'll get to that ending in a few minutes. But I have to say, I think the ending of the Joseph story would have been better as a good comeuppance story. Right? A revenge story, a vengeance story. I love a good comeuppance story, right? The ones where the bad guy, the one you really just grow to dislike as you go through the story, he really sucks. Right, those bad guys, right? They get what's coming to them in the end. My favorite one is an old book called The Count of Monte Cristo, and the perfection at which Dantes gets revenge on the people who wronged him, who destroyed his life. It's perfect. It's brilliant. Love it. Could hear it over and over again. It wraps up so nicely. More recently, I finished reading another somewhat comeuppance story. It's called The Frozen River. If you've read it, you know. If not, it's a good book. You should read it. So we're going to do a little exercise, right? I like to do a little play scenario type exercises like I do with my students. And so we're going to imagine just for fun the Joseph comeuppance story. Now, Joseph, if you read the whole story, wasn't immune. Even in the whole real story, he wasn't immune to a little revenge on his brothers, right? With the whole accusing them of being spies, and the thing with the younger brother and the silver cup. But eventually he gets past that. We'll get to that. But if we're going to live in the world where Joseph completes the tale, right, he needs to go further than just those little games that he plays with his brother. So imagine with me, right? After they arrest the youngest brother, Benjamin, for stealing the silver cup, right? He gets word to his brothers that they can still rescue Benjamin because they're wanting to save the younger brother, right? They can still rescue him by going to the bottom of a still being built pyramid. And they find Benjamin chained to the wall in a dark chamber. And as they are beginning to unchain him, they've all gathered in the chamber to unchain their brother, right? A strong sensation overcomes them, and they are left unconscious for a period of time. Dun, dun, dun. When they awake, they find Joseph has walled them into the dark chamber. It's only then that Joseph reveals who he truly is, laughing like a madman as the brothers plead and beg for forgiveness. Joseph laying each brick upon each bad thing that happened to him after they kidnapped him and sent him to Egypt. And the story ends with the final brick being laid and Joseph rubbing his hands clean on a new colorful coat that he made himself. Pretty rough, huh? I guess that's what I get for drawing inspiration from an Edgar Allan Poe story. Sorry, my English teacher's showing. But really, how satisfying is that in reality? Right? We maybe all feel good for a little bit that the mean, jealous brothers got what was coming to them. But frankly, the truth, I figure, isn't like that. It rarely is. Because in reality, that's not how the story ends. And it's for a good reason, too. Right? Joseph can't stand it anymore what he's doing to his brothers, right? He does have revenge in his heart. He wants to mess with them a little bit. He does. He makes them wait it out a little bit. But he can't stand it, right, what he's doing. And he chooses to reveal himself to them. He embraces them with love and tears, and he invites them to come live with him in Egypt, where they can all be happy together again. He just wants to see his father again. He wants to be reunited with the family that created his first home for him. And that's what forgiveness brings us. It brings us back home to a place of comfort, to a place of love, instead of a place of hate and disappointment. That bitterness, that evilness that lives in Joseph. The bitterness that lives in the Joseph of my alternate version. In reality, that's toxic to him. It's toxic to our insides, right? It eats at him, even after he completes the final act, right? He gets done with it, and the next day, it continues to eat at him, right? And any other acts of vengeance he does just tears at his soul a little bit each time. Each day that toxin lives in him, right? It's like Voldemort from Harry Potter, tearing his soul each time a murder is taken, right? Each time a life is taken, right? Each time a Horcrux is created. A little bit of ourselves, a little bit of himself was torn, and pretty soon we're just hollow versions of ourselves. Unlike the comeuppance stories that I so much enjoy, right? More realistic versions of revenge that I've seen depicted. They show the comeuppance occur, all right? The person does get what they are seeking. But instead of feeling great, the person often feels worse. That toxin just doesn't magically disappear. It sticks with us. And really the only cure is overcoming the desire for vengeance with something, and again, Harry Potter reference, much more powerful: love. 1,000 years after Joseph's story occurs, we get a shining example of this, right? Because Jesus doesn't have a comeuppance story either, even though we couldn't blame him, right? I won't drag you down that road again, making up the Jesus comeuppance story, right? But, you can imagine Jesus messing with Judas, Ghost Jesus messing with Judas a little bit. Just a little bit. That's good stuff if anybody wants to take it for their Netflix movie. Jesus handles it better, even better than Joseph. We know the famous line at the end: "Forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they do." In his moment of great pain and agony and suffering, he loves them. That lesson, and the one from Joseph, helps us see and imagine, right, the power of storytelling. How much more powerful restorative justice in a relationship can be than vengeance. It brings us grace and generosity. It brings that to the table instead of getting even. And if we are to take these lessons to heart in our own lives, the unfortunate part to many of us is that we have to acknowledge the role that restoring the offending party has in attaining forgiveness and attaining right within a relationship, right? That idea is one of the central tenets of what's called restorative justice. Many of you might have heard of that. It's a pretty common idea in the teaching world as a way to mitigate conflict in your classroom and as a school overall. And it's the idea, among other things, where not only is the hurt person, their pain, their suffering, their injustice considered, but what can be done to actively make both parties whole and see the total perspective of an issue and not just one side. And when you do that, both parties feel a sense of justice. All of the wrongs are dealt with, not just the central one that's causing the conflict. And for Joseph, going back to our story, it took understanding, probably, the jealousy the genuine hurt that his brothers felt at their father's favoritism. And it stings not being the favorite. It makes us resent people, right? And and Joseph acknowledged, right, that, hey, I understand, guys, how you felt in that moment. I can see why you were upset with the way things were in our lives. I get it. I'm sorry that happened to you. And then also understanding that, hey, well, maybe the best way to handle that wasn't to sell me into slavery. Maybe. If both sides get their issues heard and dealt with, then true forgiveness can happen, right? Then the grace and generosity commanded by the Jesus example can be done, right? And then once that is worked out, we are much, much more capable of welcoming our brothers, not only brothers, but anybody, and bring them home with us. If there's one thing that I have learned since I last called Grove City home, it's that seeing each and every person as someone of worth, and that God's love has to be the first thing we consider in every interaction. Right? When we see every single human as a human first that has value, everything else follows from that. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I've learned. And when that happens, we can frame any other conflict much better than if we choose to lead with anger or spite or retribution in our hearts. So, no matter what, folks, when we take the time to see each person as a person first, even if that person is bad, quote unquote, right? We can begin the journey of restoration instead of the journey of vengeance, because it is a journey. It's not a quick trip down the street. It's a long road. But both are a long road. The vengeance road and the forgiveness road, those are long roads, right? Again, going back to quoting my Monte Cristo example, that took years to set up. And all that time you have to live with, is this the right thing or not? It's a journey. But at the end of the journey is a welcome home. It is one that we all are blessed with in this community. And I hope that I can continue to come back home and feel that same sense every time I walk through those doors. So thank you, folks, for giving me this opportunity. God bless, and I look forward to visiting with each and one of you later today.